Hello everyone and welcome back to our recap of the Players' Cup video game regional qualifiers. We are into week 3, going over, talking about the games, seeing how they play out all the way through the Players' Cup finals that happened a little while ago, and we'll get to those soon enough. But today we have a pretty cool match between Maynard and Edoardo Giunipero Ferraris. So this is a pretty exciting match. Last time we had a fairly interesting match. We had kind of like a Corviknight face-off. So today, let's see what we have, and let's go ahead and let's just jump right on into it. Boop. So, Maynard, we are watching it from his perspective, and Edoardo is on the other side. Edoardo leads off with Lapras and Incineroar. So these are two very, very popular Pokemon from Series 5, and these are still Series 5 rules by the by. Series 6 transition happened today, so one thing to keep note of. But Edoardo leading off that Incineroar. Intimidate here, going to be very important against Maynard's Rapid Strike Urshifu. But Maynard leading with Urshifu and Togekiss. Togekiss, a very solid mon on its own. It's pretty alright facing up against an Incineroar, but Lapras here, big threat. There's not a lot that's pressuring it right now. Lapras is probably going to stay on the field. It's probably going to be able to Gigantamax and set off that G-Max Resonance. Maynard swapping into the Tyranitar, getting the Sandstream up. At the very least, that provides Tyranitar with a little bit of extra special defense in case Lapras ends up targeting that slot. And here we see here, Edoardo is in fact Gigantamaxing. I am 100% certain that it is going to be the Lapras here. Incineroar on Edoardo's side could certainly go for something like a Fake Out or just a Parting Shot to make sure that Matt's Pokemon aren't doing too much damage into this Lapras. Lapras here setting up the Aurora Veil is going to be very, very important. It's definitely going to limit the amount of damage coming out from either of Matt's Pokemon. I think that's kind of be the theme that we see here from Edoardo and Matt. There we see the Fake Out into the Urshifu, just guaranteeing that as long as it doesn't Dynamax, this Lapras is good to go. And there we see Tyranitar doesn't take too much damage. I think the Sand definitely helps with it there, although it is not weak to the G-Max Resonance. And there we see the Aurora Veil goes up. Sand starts getting in a little bit of chip damage around the board. Definitely going to be important. So let's see what Matt's next move is. Right now, though, this Lapras is pretty threatening to Tyranitar. A Max Geyser here is not something that Tyranitar wants to be taking. And Incineroar doesn't really like being matched up against either of these Pokemon. From Edoardo's side, Urshifu using something like Close Combat or even just Surging Strikes here can easily take down the Incineroar. However, this Lapras kind of seems to be sitting pretty, especially with this Aurora Veil up. Tyranitar, of course, it does know Rock-type moves, which are super effective into Ice, but the Aurora Veil up is pretty big. Lapras is very, very bulky, and Urshifu, even if it does Dynamax or Gigantamax, a Max Knuckle out of it is not going to be doing a ton of damage into Lapras. Here we see Edoardo switching out likely into something that's going to be perfectly fine taking, as we see here, Rillaboom comes in, perfectly fine taking Water-type moves, Rock-type moves. Incineroar, Rillaboom, a fairly bulky Pokemon on its own, likes to take hits, and it puts so much pressure on both of Matt's Pokemon. Edoardo here using the Max Guard, perfectly fine, just letting the Incineroar slot take some hits. Urshifu is going to be taking some damage here, but not too much. Even with these critical hits, not caring about the Aurora Veil, Rillaboom's resistance taking it like a champ. Here we see Tyranitar using Lash Out. If Edoardo hadn't opted instead to try to use Parting Shot on the Incineroar to swap out, this Lash Out would have been doing quite a bit more damage. So good move there, just bringing the Rillaboom in on a straight switch. And Pokemon on Matt's side still looking relatively healthy. The grassy terrain being up does heal a little bit. But as we said before, neither of Matt's Pokemon like to take a grassy glide from a Rillaboom. And especially we're in grassy terrain. Tyranitar is going to be taking a lot of damage. If it does survive somehow, which seems unlikely, a weakness policy trigger will likely happen, but it will only really have one turn to make use of that power boost. Urshifu, of course, it is the Rapid Strike style, so grass type moves are super effective against it as well. We know Matt has the Togekiss in the back, could swap in the Togekiss, but that leaves the Togekiss vulnerable to a G-Max Resonance from the Lapras. Now from Edoardo's side, Max Guard already came out. I think there's a decent chance that we go ahead and see something like a Max Geyser here. Tyranitar here. Tyranitar from Matt very well could protect. That certainly is a move that we see on it. Rillaboom then wouldn't really be able to do too much against it. And a Max Geyser wouldn't knock it out all of the way, most likely for this Tyranitar. Like I said, Tyranitar's stats are phenomenal. It can take a lot of hits, and with that Protect, cutting the damage down by 1/4, it could definitely survive. Weakness policy would be very, very big here. Matt, though, going to go ahead and Gigantamax the Urshifu. So now, in case Edoardo did want to Max Guard, Urshifu breaks right through that, and perhaps a Gigantamax Urshifu can take a Grassy Glide a little bit better than a non-Gigantamax Urshifu. We go ahead, we see the Max Knuckle coming out. It's moving before the Urshifu, or it's moving before the Rillaboom, excuse me. So that tells me that there might be a Wood Hammer, in fact, coming out. Potentially a knockoff trying to get rid of Tyranitar's weakness policy, maybe? There we see the knockoff into the Tyranitar using that Protect. So Edoardo trying to get through that weakness policy, make sure Tyranitar doesn't become too scary of a Pokemon before long. We see Urshifu, though, it takes that G-Max Resonance very, very well. So, Edoardo definitely not in a great spot here. Rillaboom certainly looking weak now. No Grassy Glides have been fired off yet. That weakness policy is still on the Tyranitar. And I have a feeling that if Edoardo was confident in Grassy Glide knocking out Tyranitar, potentially if Rillaboom was like Choice Banded or something, Edoardo would have gone for that. Since Edoardo didn't, there's a good chance Tyranitar will survive a Grassy Glide, and then that weakness policy would just be even more terrifying. With Urshifu here doing a ton of damage in its Gigantamax form, and now with that Max Knuckle boost doing even more. So Edoardo definitely gonna have to consider, again, Rillaboom, we saw that knockoff, it likely has something like an Assault Vest on it, so a Wood Hammer could be seen, although it does often have something like a Superpower that could take out the Tyranitar. But Edoardo actually opting to switch out the Rillaboom, save it for a later date, maybe when Grassy Glides can actually start doing something here. Incineroar coming in, getting Intimidate off, and now Urshifu is back down. It's back down to a -1 attack stat, as it did get intimidated off that first Incineroar swap in. Tyranitar switching out for Matt, going back into Togekiss, so we kind of have a reset of the very first game, the very first turn of the game, except this Max Knuckle is coming down. It does a good chunk of the Incineroar, doesn't take it down all the way. That Intimidate coming in big. Now this Urshifu back up to neutral attack stats. Lapras is out of the Dynamax. It's not going to be doing as much damage, but the Freeze Dry here will be super effective against the Urshifu, thanks to Freeze Dry being super effective on water types. But now, both of Matt's Pokemon are really kind of alright with what Edoardo has out here. There are, I believe that there's one more turn of Dynamax left for Matt, which is going to be pretty big. Incineroar could use something like Parting Shot, but Urshifu is very likely faster than it, which is going to cause quite a few issues. Togekiss could go ahead. A helping hand here would be relatively big if Matt has it. It could, of course, use Follow Me, although there's a good chance that Edoardo is going to go ahead and try to just fake out into the Togekiss, limit as much damage as possible. But if Matt wants to go ahead and try to get a little more aggressive here, Togekiss, is in a relatively decent spot to do that. It's faster than both of the Pokemon that Edoardo has. Dazzling Gleam here could be enough chip damage for the Urshifu to take down either of Edoardo's Pokemon. But Matt actually opting to go for the G-Max Rapid Strike. Incineroar just barely surviving here. Even with the super effective damage, Berry is triggered, and it goes back up to about a third of its health. A Dazzling Gleam from Togekiss here, if it is specially invested at all, could potentially take down this Incineroar, but not quite. Freeze Dry coming out of Lapras again, doing a lot of damage to Urshifu. Urshifu not looking too great here. Burning Jealousy coming out. This time for Matt. Smart play here. Burning Jealousy. If Matt had used a Max Knuckle again, potentially into Lapras to try to take it out or to do any extra chip damage. Heck, even into the Incineroar, there's a good chance it wouldn't have taken it out. In fact, it definitely wouldn't have. And Burning Jealousy would have put Matt's Urshifu into a very, very tough spot, dropping its attack further. And Togekiss would not have liked to have the burn either. Of course, it might have something like Lumberry, in which case the status gets taken off right off the bat. But most of the time we have seen Togekiss in this series with something like a Scope Lens to increase the critical hit ratio, or even just like Safety Goggles or a Healing Berry. But most often that Scope Lens has been what we've seen. Now Edoardo actually showing the fourth Pokemon. Porygon 2 comes out. Lapras not quite going down. Edoardo's Pokemon are surviving in really clutch situations here. Togekiss, though, is a little bit quicker. Air Slash coming out into the Porygon 2. It's going to do a good chunk of damage. Togekiss is relatively strong, and we see that critical hit coming out. This Porygon 2 is most definitely not going to like potentially taking a close combat from Urshifu. Looks like that was a life due from the Lapras, healing up both of Edoardo's Pokemon a considerable amount. Definitely an interesting tech. Life Dew isn't something that you see very often on Lapras. Edoardo's definitely does seem to be more on the defensive side. We haven't seen anything like Life Orb, no real way to trigger the weakness policy except for maybe Grassy Glide off of Rillaboom, which you don't really want to do from Edoardo's side. And so it looks like Edoardo's just looking to grind out what Matt has here. So this Lapras, though, it was pretty healthy before that last hit. Another close combat could take it down. This Porygon 2 most definitely doesn't want to be taking a close combat from Matt's Urshifu. Togekiss here can just start clicking Dazzling Gleams, picking up good damage on both of these Pokemon here. Despite their bulk, as we said, both of Edoardo's Pokemon are definitely very bulky. And as we said before, that Rillaboom looks like it didn't quite do a ton of damage. So it definitely looked like it might be something like an Assault Vest, although who knows, maybe it is Choice Banded. And that's why Edoardo swapped it out to try to get a different move other than Knockoff. Incineroar, also a fairly defensive Pokemon, pretty bulky. Those Intimidates and Parting Shots, lowering the other team's attack and special attack stats. So Edoardo's looking to kind of grind this game out. Matt, though, definitely more on the offensive side, trying to do as much damage as possible. And Edoardo just going so hard on these defensive switches, trying to get as many Intimidates as possible with the Incineroar. But this Incineroar is weak. It's not going to like taking any hits from Matt's Pokemon. Like, even a Tickle from Togekiss could be almost enough with a critical hit to take it out. But close combat comes in, that is going to be more than enough to deal with it. We could see something like a Trick Room from Porygon 2 here. Lapras is definitely going to be a lot slower than Urshifu. Definitely a lot slower than Togekiss. I don't know about Tyranitar. It depends on the investments. Porygon 2, Thunderbolt coming out. Urshifu goes down. That water typing taking super effective damage. But Urshifu has kind of wreaked a good amount of havoc on Edoardo's team. We know that Rillaboom in the back is weak. Matt still hasn't revealed his fourth Pokemon, which we do see is Rillaboom. And that can take care of Lapras pretty easily if it comes down to something like a 1v1. We do know that Lapras has a Freeze Drive. Pretty good chance that there is not also Blizzard or another powerful Ice-type move. Edoardo now sending out the Lapras. And good thing for Matt here, Tyranitar is very, very healthy. The special defense boost from the sand is going to be big here. Lapras doesn't seem to be too strong. And the other important thing is that Aurora Veil seems to be should be getting ready to drop here relatively soon. Probably in the next 2 or 3 turns at the latest. And once that happens, Matt is going to kind of have a field day with the rest of Edoardo's team, unless Edoardo can just put out a ton of damage here. Lapras using Protect, trying to survive as long as possible here. Let Porygon 2 try to put in some work. Togekiss using Air Slash in the Lapras slot. Rock Slide out of Tyranitar, protected from the Lapras, but it does hit the Porygon 2. It doesn't do very much damage, but a Flinch could be big here. Flinch does come out, so no Trick Room, no Recover. No Thunderbolt into the Togekiss. All very, very good things here. Sand damage chipping away slowly but surely, and there goes the Aurora Veil. Now Matt's Pokemon are kind of just ready to start wiping the floor here. Of course, Tyranitar does have an Intimidate on it. It's not at full power, but it is still a very scary Pokemon despite all of that. So on Edoardo's side, I think kind of the way to win here is just going to be like stalling out with this Porygon 2. Try to take down this Tyranitar as fast as you can, because Porygon 2 really can deal with a lot. It's very bulky. Moves like Recover can be big. Tri Attack can cause paralysis, can cause freeze, can even get a burn. A burn would be huge potentially. And Lapras can still do a decent amount of damage. It's obviously a defensive Pokemon, but this Life Dew here, the amount of recovery on Edoardo's side is definitely something Matt has to be worried about. But again, even if Edoardo can just sit here and recover constantly, Matt's going to be able to put out just so much damage and so much pressure once some of these rotations make their way through and Tyranitar is no longer intimidated. Here we see the Rock Slide, even with an Intimidate, does a lot to Lapras here. Missed the Porygon 2. The Trick Room here does come out. I like this a lot. This is probably the best way for Edoardo to get back into this. This Lapras, is most definitely slower than this Tyranitar. However, now Rillaboom is out here, and a Grassy Glide is going to take out Lapras pretty handily. I wouldn't be surprised to see a switch here just to kind of get Lapras a little bit healthier. Porygon 2 might have Ice Beam, in which case it can deal with Rillaboom a little bit better than Lapras can. But this Tyranitar is definitely scary right now, as well as the Rillaboom. But mainly the Tyranitar is because it has a Rock Slide, which can take out Lapras, but it almost always carries Superpower, which is going to be doing a ton of damage to Porygon 2. Lapras here using Protect smartly. Edoardo either having to do that or switch just so it can ensure that it survives. Here we see the Ice Beam out of Porygon 2 into the Rillaboom. It does about 50%. Sand is going to put it down below 100 health. Rock Slide doesn't hit the Lapras. It's going to tickle the Porygon 2. And we'll see what comes out of the Rillaboom here. It uses a knockoff, smart, takes off the Eviolite from Porygon 2. Doesn't entirely remove the bulk, just naturally Porygon 2 is pretty defensive, but it does make things a lot easier for Tyranitar and that Togekiss in the back. So, one more Ice Beam from Porygon 2 will take down Rillaboom. Lapras, though, Protect has been used. Edoardo could try to go for a double Protect. The grassy terrain here is prolonging Lapras's life, most definitely in this stand. But at the same time, the threat of Grassy Glide is just so huge here. If you're Matt, I think you kind of have to be prepared for the swap here. Lapras isn't really putting on too much pressure. I don't think you super have to worry about it. I think you can just keep clicking Rock Slide with Tyranitar, and that'll deal with it eventually. Edoardo, though, we do see the Rillaboom swap coming in, but Edoardo just ignoring that slot. As we said, going to the Porygon 2. Now Porygon 2 is much, much weaker, but the Recover comes out. That is going to buff its HP quite a bit. As we said, though, Matt just continually clicking Rock Slide. If either of Edoardo's Pokemon go down at any point, Rock Slide is going to be able to take out the Lapras handily. Absolutely no problem. Porygon 2, Grassy Terrain, still healing it a little bit, even though it is not actually touching the ground. Definitely a little... That's one thing where in Grassy Terrain, you have to be touching the ground. Porygon 2 there, I see you not technically on the ground, but you know what? We'll let it slide. Speaking of slides, Matt Maynard, clicking Rock Slide again would take out the Rillaboom. If it hits, of course, it does have to hit. Porygon 2 would take quite a bit of damage. I wouldn't be surprised if Edoardo tries to go for that same knockoff strategy, just because at this point Tyranitar is even healthier. And if you didn't think that Grassy Glide was going to take out Tyranitar before, why would you think it would take it out now? But at the same time, potentially this Rillaboom has something like Wood Hammer. Potentially it has something like Superpower, maybe even Brick Break. And that could do a lot of damage to Tyranitar, maybe even take it out. But again, if I'm Matt, I just keep clicking Rock Slide, potentially just keep clicking Grassy Glide right now into the Porygon 2. And yeah, there we see Porygon 2 almost even goes down. Edoardo Grassy Glide into the Tyranitar and does KO it. I'm a little surprised that we didn't see the Grassy Glide from before, although it was a crit. Maybe that mattered. Edoardo might have been banking on that, but now all of Edoardo's Pokemon are very, very weak, but the Ice Beam comes out of Porygon 2 into the Rillaboom. It should take it out here. Now it's a Togekiss against the world. And that was another critical hit. So previously the Ice Beam from Porygon 2 did just under half onto the Rillaboom. And we had that crit from Edoardo's Rillaboom into the Tyranitar. Both of those might have been very, very big. They might have been game-changing. Matt here, as we just saw, Trick Room is still up, which means that both of these Pokemon, Rillaboom with Grassy Glide doesn't do a ton to Togekiss. We'll be moving before it no matter what, and this Porygon 2 will also be moving before it. Matt could definitely Protect, try to stall out the Trick Room, and then click Dazzling Gleam. Without the Eviolite, it's going to be doing a good chunk to Porygon 2. Rillaboom might be Assault Vested, but we saw it did a pretty good amount of damage to it before. And I think in a 1v1 outside of Trick Room, this Togekiss will definitely beat the Lapras. Here we see Rillaboom using Grassy Glide, though. Togekiss resists it with its Flying type, takes it like a champ, but now Porygon 2 using Recover here. A good chance that Matt maybe didn't want to let this Porygon 2 get a free Recover off. And here we see the Dazzling Gleam comes out. It does take down the Rillaboom. Porygon 2 gets pretty weak. Another Dazzling Gleam just might take it out, although the recovery from Grassy Terrain might just put it out of reach. Twisted Dimension returns to normal. Togekiss is going to be moved faster than Porygon, and now there's no grass for the Porygon 2 to get additional recovery from. Lapras coming out here. It is definitely weak. There is no Aurora Veil to buff it up. Togekiss, again, it could potentially be Scope Lens. It could be maybe a Babiri Berry to resist any Steel-type attacks. So in that case, it won't be able to do any particularly cool shenanigans with crits unless it gets a little bit lucky. But I will say, again, I think at least one of those crits from Edoardo's side on that previous turn mattered. Absolutely mattered. I think there's a pretty good chance Tyranitar was going down to a Grassy Glide no matter what. But I do definitely think that Rillaboom would have survived a non-critical Ice Beam. Edoardo here looking like he is trying to stall out the timer. With 45 seconds left, just might be able to do it. It depends on how much your time Edoardo has left, but this literally might come down to the very last second. A Dazzling Gleam here has a chance to take out both of Edoardo's Pokemon, but if the battle ends, Edoardo has more Pokemon than Matt, and in that case, I think Edoardo will take game 1. Definitely kind of goes to show how defensive Edoardo's team is. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Edoardo could definitely try to take it to time. Porygon 2 and Lapras had a lot of recovery here. Matt probably did enough damage to KO Lapras and Porygon 2 or 3 times over. 2, 1. It says 0 on the clock. And Matt lost to Edoardo on that game. So, our first game that kind of ends on timer. That's definitely always something that, you know, it's not always the most exciting to see, but we got to, it was a very defensive, it was kind of defense versus pure offense. Tyranitar, Urshifu, Rillaboom, all very, very offensive Pokemon. And Lapras and Porygon 2 on Eduardo's side, very defensive. The Incineroars intimidates there, coming in pretty clutch. If Matt's Pokemon had been able to do just a little bit more damage, that might have been able to knock out enough Pokemon, carry him the rest of the way through. And again, I think those crits absolutely mattered, particularly the Ice Beam onto the Rillaboom. Even just one more Grassy Glide that got off would have KO'd the Porygon 2, would have KO'd whatever was in that other slot there. Absolutely huge important moves there. But, of course, we'll see if this next game goes to time. I actually kind of like both players' game plans, but maybe not quite as much as Eduardo's. Winning on timer 2 times in a row is going to be a little bit more difficult, as the opponent now kind of knows what movesets you're running, isn't going to be so much afraid as, well, again, they knew coming in everybody's movesets, everybody's items and stuff, but you're not trying to play to time most of the time. And I think Edoardo might have to try to change a few more things up, get a little bit more offensive. If Edoardo does kind of fall back, trying to stall things out, wait as long as possible, and just keep healing up, I think Matt's definitely going to be able to adjust, kind of maybe bring in that Rillaboom earlier and start really trying to wail on that Lapras and on that Porygon 2 before they can keep recovering as much, and try to get them out of the way as fast as possible. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this next game. So, Edoardo sending out, same lead as before, Incineroar and Lapras getting the Intimidate off right away. I think I liked both players' leads, at least quite a bit. Matt, though, changing it up, sending out the Tyranitar, not the Urshifu this time. Sand coming out right off the bat. So Urshifu here, or not Urshifu, my bad. Tyranitar here can use something like a superpower into Lapras just right away. Or if it wants to Dynamax, it can go for a max Rockfall and do a lot of damage. Matt, though, bring in the Urshifu now that it is no longer going to be able... Matt, though, could bring in the Urshifu since Incineroar can't intimidate it now. We didn't see anything like a parting shot. Wouldn't be surprised if Incineroar maybe didn't have it. Really, though, all we saw was Fake Out and a lot of switching. Eduardo, though, going for the Gigantamax Lapras. Pretty safe to assume here. It looks like Matt is not Dynamaxing Tyranitar on his side. I really do like the switch in for the Urshifu here. I think this Lapras is going to be using G-Max Resonance into that slot. Urshifu, again, takes it like a champ. Incineroar probably going to use Fake Out into Tyranitar. Wouldn't be surprised. Actually, no Fake Out comes out, and but the Resonance comes in into the Urshifu. Lapras is actually faster than the Tyranitar. That is a good thing for Matt to note. Another critical hit from Eduardo's side. Again, might be important later on in the game. Urshifu isn't exactly the bulkiest Pokemon, especially against special defense stuff. Could do some important things. Could put Urshifu in range of some important things. And there we see the parting shot coming out. So now we know Incineroar does have Fake Out, does have parting shot. gets swapped out, and there's a chance for it to come back in with this Urshifu out. Again, this is definitely going to be big. Both kind of all of Matt's attackers are very, very physical. And here we see Edoardo going ahead, bringing in the Rillaboom. We could see the knockoff play again, but and who knows, again, maybe this Grassy Glide doesn't take out the Tyranitar. I have a feeling that even without the crit, though, that health bar moved pretty darn fast. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes all the way down. At the same time, Edoardo could definitely just swap back in. Tyranitar is already at -2 attack, so it's not going to be able to do too much. And this Urshifu is being at taking it to -1 would definitely help. Matt, though, like we said, I want to seeing more aggression out of Matt is kind of going to be the way to win this. Aurora Veil is already up, but you have to start getting damage out sooner. If Edoardo brought Porygon 2 again, and it looks like Edoardo brought the same 4, if Edoardo brought Porygon 2 again, there is a good chance that Edoardo can just start stalling things out. Here we see from Matt, Dynamax coming out, probably the Gigantamax onto the Urshifu. There we see it comes up. Rapid Strike Urshifu, back at it again. So something like a Max Knuckle here, it would go right through the Max Guard. We saw Edoardo do that on the second turn last game, even with the Urshifu out. We didn't see any switches, so Rillaboom is staying in. Grassy Glide coming out into the Urshifu, does a lot of damage, doesn't take it out. Hailstorm actually coming out now. That's likely going into Rillaboom. We'll see if it takes it out. Yeah, so it doesn't quite take it out, and Urshifu is definitely under some offensive pressure here. And now Hail's coming out. Tyranitar no longer has a special defense boost. G-Max Resonance coming out again from Edoardo into Matt's Urshifu. That almost makes me wonder if Edoardo doesn't even have an actual water type move for Tyranitar, and we see the Rock Slide doesn't hit the Rillaboom. That could be huge. Obviously, it wouldn't be doing a ton of damage again as Tyranitar is at -2. But these misses here, these critical hits, are definitely not playing into Matt's favor. I think Matt has gotten one critical hit that maybe mattered. I'm not even entirely certain. It probably just got healed back up right away on the last game. But kind of back to this Lapras, we've only seen G-Max Resonance out of it. We know we've seen Life Dew, and we have seen Protect. We know that the base move for this is Freeze Dry. We don't know what that fourth move is for Lapras. I would honestly imagine that a Max Geyser into Tyranitar right here would be able to do a lot of damage. You're not really scared of the weakness policy. Tyranitar is at -2. In fact, I would almost want to go ahead and trigger it now and get Tyranitar down to about half health so that it is manageable in case Rillaboom does go down. But it is certainly dangerous. Matt here, Urshifu is under a lot of pressure from the Rillaboom. I didn't exactly see how much damage Urshifu took, but it was a lot. It is most definitely in a range of a crit from a Grassy Glide. It is most definitely in range of a good amount of damage. Tyranitar here going for Protect, though. If there is a Max Geyser to come out of this Lapras, Tyranitar will most definitely be surviving it. Grassy Glide, though, going to do a lot of damage, and it takes out the Urshifu. No critical hit, just goes straight down. Only one attack out of this Urshifu, doesn't even KO the Rillaboom. And Matt's going to have to figure out what to do next. Here we see another G-Max Resonance into the Tyranitar. Not going to do too much damage. Tyranitar, again, is very bulky. The Protect here helps it even more. Rillaboom, though, taking damage from the Hail. Going to be healed up a little bit from the Grassy Terrain. Tyranitar taking the damage as well. We'll see if Matt changes up the fourth Pokemon or just wants to bring in Togekiss again. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Eduardo's Lapras here will be coming out of Gigantamax form real soon. It has used 3 G-Max Resonances in a row. It looks like, looking at the screen here, it looks like Matt has just opted to bring the exact same Pokemon again. Definitely interesting. Rillaboom here. We actually see that the Miracle Seed on it. So grass type moves are boosted, but it doesn't have something like a Choice Band, not even Life Orb, no Expert Belt, just the Grassy Seed to boost the grass type attacks. So it will be doing a lot of damage. High horsepower going into the Rillaboom slot. It looks like potentially covering for the Incineroar switch. But so if I'm Edoardo here, Lapras is in a relatively good position. It's healthy. Tyranitar is not going to be able to do a ton of damage here. It could just Protect, but here we see the Incineroar actually coming out again into the Lapras slot. Intimidate's coming off. Tyranitar is going to be at -3. We'll see if Matt switches that out here. I think at this point you almost have to. Tyranitar is certainly a threat. There we go. We see that. I like that switch out here. Togekiss comes in. Now neither of Matt's Pokemon are going to be taking very much damage from Edoardo's Rillaboom, but we see the U-turn come out. It does a good chunk to Matt's Rillaboom and goes on back. We'll see potentially what the fourth Pokemon is out of Edoardo here. Probably not wanting to bring the Lapras in again, unless you potentially just want to fake out with the Incineroar. And there we see that Porygon 2. And we see Edoardo going for that very bulky, very defensive setup again. Except this time, Urshifu is already knocked out. High Horsepower comes out. It hardly does a thing to Porygon 2. This Incineroar intimidates, cutting in half what is already neutered damage from the Aurora Veil. Speaking of which, that is going to be going down in a couple turns here, though there is definitely still time on it for Edoardo to utilize. And it's just, Matt is not able to do enough damage into any of these Pokemon here, really flexing the strength of G-Max Resonance out of Lapras here. If I'm Matt, this Rillaboom, again, fake out here is probably the most obvious thing into the Rillaboom, although it could definitely be into the Togekiss. Togekiss is not as much of an offensive bond, though. Edoardo knows this, and the switch out here into the Tyranitar means Tyranitar is fresh, it is ready to go, Sand is up, and now Tyranitar kind of has to face down against the world here. This is a pretty strong combination of Pokemon, though. There we see the fake out into the Tyranitar slot. Again, Edoardo not really showing much fear of Togekiss here. And Air Slash not even doing very much damage. And Porygon 2 Trick Room goes up, but now Tyranitar is out. Tyranitar just might be the slowest Pokemon on the field. And Superpower could come out of it, could just be more Rock Slides. But this Incineroar has to go. If Matt doesn't take it out, all of Matt's damaging Pokemon are physical attackers, and Incineroar just kind of bodies them. The only thing that Tyranitar can really do here is maybe click Superpower, Rock Slide. Really isn't even doing that much to the Incineroar. Now Grassy Terrain is gone, which is a perfect time for Edoardo to bring Rillaboom back in. And again, Rillaboom is a huge threat to the Tyranitar. We saw it last time, got one-shotted by the Grassy Glide. Porygon 2 using the Ice Beam into the Togekiss does a chunk of damage, bringing it below half health. Parting Shot comes out of the Incineroar. Incineroar is actually slower than Tyranitar. That is definitely going to be big. The attack and special attack fall. Matt just cannot get a single attack off that is at its appropriate strength in either of these past two games. Edoardo controlling this battlefield so defensively and so well. Rock Slide comes out here, no chances to flinch anything. Edoardo's Pokemon have already moved. It does a decent amount to the Lapras, but hardly does anything to the Porygon 2. Air Slash comes out, once again into the Lapras. Lapras fairly specially bulky, but Lapras is getting a little bit low. However, we do know it has Life Dew. We also know that Tyranitar is slower than Lapras. At least that's what I can assume from the previous turns, unless they are somehow speed tying. Things taking chip damage from the sand. Togekiss actually going for a Protect here. It looks like, once again, if I'm Matt, I think you just have to keep clicking Rock Slide. Edoardo is going to continue to heal. We see the Lapras there using the Protect. On Edoardo's side, I think you just continue to heal. I think both of the Pokemon here are all right dealing with what Matt has. But they have to be bulkier. Tyranitar using the Rock Slide. Lapras does Protect. A miss here would definitely be important, but it's not going to be, again, this Rock Slide is not doing very much to this Porygon 2. As the turns go by, Porygon 2 is getting whittled down, but a single recover is going to wipe out all of that hard work from Matt's side. And I think it is simply a matter of waiting out this Aurora Veil. Once again, we saw that Matt can do a lot of damage. It is certainly it is certainly an option, but Edoardo's Pokemon, as we said before, very bulky. Incineroar coming out again, reducing Tyranitar's attack stat again. This is not something that Matt wants to be seeing. This Incineroar has to go down sooner rather than later if Matt wants to win. This is kind of Edoardo's whole game plan here. Togekiss going for the double Protect here. Porygon 2 using the Ice Beam into the Togekiss. Tyranitar, once again, I imagine, clicked Rock Slide, click to win. Comes out, it brings Incineroar below half health, does a little bit to the Porygon 2, but that's not going to be enough to take out the Incineroar. It does trigger the Berry. Now Incineroar is at even more health. Absolutely no longer in range of being one-shot really by anything. And Matt's Pokemon are slowly getting whittled down. Togekiss gonna die to the to Matt's own Sandstorm here sooner rather than later. Trick Room, as we see here, one more turn. The Aurora Veil, though, did wear off. Tyranitar is in a decent position if it can get its attack back to normal. Matt does still have that one switching option left. Incineroar could very well just be using Fake Out to try to limit at the biggest amount of damage, which is still Tyranitar. Togekiss isn't doing a ton right now unless it wants to go for a Dazzling Gleam, but it is very much threatened by Porygon 2, and a Dazzling Gleam, I doubt, will be killing Porygon 2 on this turn. It would kind of be a sacrifice just to get the damage off and maybe bring Tyranitar back in without it taking any hits. Grass covered the battlefield. Porygon 2 uses Ice Beam, though. Togekiss didn't want to take it before, and it goes down now. Incineroar still has a move to be used. We'll see if it's either a Flare Blitz or a Parting Shot. Flare Blitz, though, comes out. Might have been a call, might have just been sheer luck, and the Rillaboom goes down. It's now a Tyranitar against the world. Tyranitar is at full health, but Matt does not have the Dynamax that was used on Urshifu. Sand does subside just in time for Matt to bring Tyranitar back out, but Edoardo still has that Rillaboom in the back. And good news is Matt did reset the grassy terrain. If Edoardo brings Rillaboom in before that ends, potentially Matt can get a Protect off with the Tyranitar. Maybe wait out the grassy terrain as long as possible, but it's going to be hard for Tyranitar to deal with the Rillaboom and just get it off the battlefield. Sandstream comes back out, and I think you just have to keep clicking Rock Slide now and hope it pays off. There's a world in which you click Lash Out if you think that the Incineroar is going to be using Parting Shot, but as we saw before, Tyranitar is actually faster than the Incineroar. Rock Slide here outside of Aurora Veil might just be able to do enough to take it out, potentially if there is a crit, but this Incineroar does take this damage extremely well. Porygon 2 survives even through a crit, and Parting Shot here comes out. Definitely some important speed investments here. Maybe if Matt had known that Incineroar would be faster, then a Lash Out here would have taken out Porygon 2, but we're not in that world. Edoardo here, I wouldn't be surprised to just see the Rillaboom to try to finish this game. And this one, a little bit ahead of schedule. No timer gonna be happening now. This Rillaboom still fairly healthy. Porygon 2 did flinch. That is gonna be big. However, Rillaboom has access to grassy terrain. Now it's gonna kind of come down for Matt. What did that crit matter last game? Like, what did that crit end up being the thing that put the nail in Matt's coffin on this Tyranitar? If it was, then Matt has a chance here to click Rock Slide, take out the Porygon 2, maybe take out the Rillaboom. If it wasn't, though, and that crit didn't matter, then this is just game over. Tyranitar is a very bulky Pokemon. Rillaboom is a very popular Pokemon. If there's a way for Matt to EV Tyranitar to survive a Grassy Glide, I wouldn't be surprised if Matt tried to do it. But even if Matt manages to take down both Porygon 2 and Rillaboom, it still has to be able to deal with Incineroar and Lapras. Incineroar has access to Fake Out. Matt would have to be able to use the Protect. Porygon 2 comes out, Incineroar comes in, gets another Intimidate off. This Tyranitar is now at negative, I believe at the very least -2, might even be at -3 attack. This Rock Slide, even if it does take out the Incineroar, here we see the Fake Out come out. Rock Slide isn't going to be coming out of coming out of Tyranitar this time. However, Incineroar is going to be taking a little bit of damage from the sand, not enough to knock it out though. Tyranitar restores a little bit of health. This might have just been a turn for Edoardo to get the Intimidate off, kind of ensure that neither of his Pokemon were going to be dying here. A couple more turns of grassy terrain. Matt is going to use Protect here. Again, now both of Edoardo's Fake Out users are on the battlefield. One has already used Fake Out, and the other is, and a Protect here will guarantee that it doesn't get hit by the other. And this is probably the best way for Matt to try to stall out grassy terrain. But again, Edoardo still has 4 Pokemon. Incineroar and Porygon 2, like, all of Edoardo's Pokemon are weak. Like that is certainly the case. If there is any Pokemon that can handle a 4v1 right now, I really wouldn't mind having a Tyranitar. The issue is that there is a Rillaboom. And honestly, even if there is a 4v1, I think I would rather have a Rillaboom in a 4v1 than a Tyranitar. And Rillaboom is on the side with 4 Pokemon. I don't see a world in which this Tyranitar is able to take out a Rillaboom. In just a straight 1v1, that's almost impossible. Like, that's just impossible for me to see. Edoardo uses the Fake Out. There's no switches here. Grassy Glide comes out. Once again, it all comes down to whether Matt thinks that crit in the last game mattered. Incineroar here is never going to go down to sand. Grassy Glide is healing it for more than it is taking. And now Tyranitar is at max health. If it can survive a Grassy Glide, this is going to be the place that it does it. No Fake Out is coming out of Edoardo from either side. A Rock Slide here is going to be doing as much damage as it'll do for the rest of the game. Honestly, wouldn't be surprised to even see a double switch here. If Edoardo switches out both Pokemon, that might just be the safest play. Lapras and Porygon 2 come in, they get knocked out, whatever. You then have Rillaboom and Incineroar back in on the next turn. One of them can use Fake Out and one of them can use Grassy Glide no matter what. Sand is going to be ending here relatively soon. And as soon as Grassy Glide goes down, as soon as Grassy Terrain goes down, you want to switch the Rillaboom back in, get it back up. On the other hand, you could just stay in with both Pokemon. Like Edoardo, if you want to stay in with the Rillaboom, I think that is a perfectly fair choice. You Grassy Glide and hope it kills. Porygon 2 comes in. It's going to take a decent amount of damage from this Rock Slide, but it's probably not going to get KO'd. Again, thanks to the Intimidate from the Incineroar. Getting another Intimidate off would be huge. Rillaboom, though, using a U-turn, not even going for the Grassy Glide, dealing even more damage to the Tyranitar here. Probably better than a normal switch. Now Tyranitar, though, gets +2 to the attack, gets +2 to the special attack, but it is almost certainly in range of a Grassy Glide. Now, this is kind of a little bit of a better version, perhaps, of doing a double switch. The U-turn on Rillaboom, giving Edoardo a little bit more space to pivot. You could bring Incineroar in now, get another Intimidate off. But at the same time, I really just think, again, maybe Edoardo knows the calc. Maybe Edoardo knows that Grassy Glide doesn't KO Tyranitar from this range. But I'm going to be honest, I'm hard-pressed to believe that. Rillaboom is a very strong Pokemon, unless Rillaboom maybe just has too many defense EVs. Here we see that 2-minute marker left up, and even if Matt can make it to the end of that timer, Edoardo has more Pokemon. Just straight up, Edoardo has more Pokemon, and it's going to, like, Tyranitar is going to be very hard-pressed to take it out. However, though, we do see kind of the fault of Edoardo's team here. It is struggling to take out a single Pokemon when you have a really kind of the perfect counter for it in Rillaboom. Rock Slide comes out here, hits both Pokemon, takes out the Incineroar, does not take out the Porygon 2. This gives Porygon 2 an option to recover. And now Tyranitar has to figure out what the heck to do against this thing. Grassy Terrain still up, which means if Rillaboom comes in, it will not get it. And Grass disappears from the battlefield. If that had lasted one more turn, Tyranitar would have gotten a chance to use Protect. Rillaboom would have come in, wouldn't have been able to reset the terrain, and Matt might have had a chance. 1 minute until the battle ends. I mean, if I'm Edoardo, I just send in the Rillaboom and Grassy Glide. But, you know, at the same time, I guess you could just wait it out. Get the guaranteed victory and don't even risk it. But I am of camp that this Rillaboom just Grassy Gliding will win the game. Lapras, though, comes in. Edoardo just stalling this one out as long as possible. 2 games in a row that are just going to timer. If I'm Matt, I really don't feel too happy about that. There's a world in which Tyranitar just wins it, but at the same time, you kind of just wish that Rillaboom had gone for Grassy Glide on a couple of turns and taken you out, but Edoardo instead opting to go for the timer win and take home this game, this match, 2-0, without killing all 4 of Matt's Pokemon even once. There we see timers at 0, and Matt loses once again. So, 2 games in a row that go to the timer. If I'm Matt, I'm definitely thinking, like, trying to go through all the ways, like, where could I have gotten in a little bit more chip damage? There were so many times in both of those games where Edoardo's Pokemon survived by just a hair, where Incineroar almost went down to sea and had to have just like 2 or 3 hit points left. The Lapras was in range of any attack from Tyranitar. The Porygon 2 was so close to dead, but those Incineroars and Intimidates kept coming in clutch. Matt just didn't have an answer for Incineroar that he was willing to bring to try to answer the Lapras and the Rillaboom and what was left. So definitely an interesting match. One of probably really the first one we've had go to timer and end up being a timer victory in both games. But definitely a good match to both players. Kept things at least a little bit more interesting. But in our next one, we'll see if we can get a little bit more action, a few big swings back and forth, and I'll see you in the next one. Farewell.